The building groaned beneath the weight of its years, a skeletal husk clinging to the outskirts of the forest, half swallowed by ivy and silence. Once a place of convalescence, the sanatorium now existed only in local whispers and fading maps, its windows either shattered or blinded by decades of grime. When Marcus stepped over the threshold, a brittle hush enveloped him, like the whole place was holding its breath. He adjusted the shoulder strap of his camera bag and clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dust, illuminating flakes of paint that peeled like old skin from the walls. Behind him, the wind nudged the door half closed, and it gave a soft, mournful creak. Not enough to slam, just enough to remind him it might. "Keep calm," he muttered, more to the silence than to himself. His voice seemed to vanish before it touched the air. The corridor lay ahead, stretching impossibly long. That was the first unsettling detail. He'd seen blueprints online, rough and incomplete. Nothing had suggested this wing should even exist. But here it was 30 meters, maybe more, lined from floor to ceiling with tall, tarnished mirrors on both sides. A forgotten architectural flourish, or something else entirely. He set the camera at the corridor's mouth, fixed it to the tripod, and let it begin recording. The plan was simple. Leave it rolling overnight. Check the footage in the morning. Paranormal investigation was a saturated field these days, but Marcus had never cared for popularity. What he sought wasn't fame, it was proof. And this place, this corridor that mirrored itself endlessly, called to him like unfinished business. As he inspected the setup, he caught a glimpse of himself in one of the nearer mirrors. His reflection looked tired, not just physically, something deeper, eyes sunken, as if sleep hadn't touched him in weeks. Yet he knew he'd rested last night, ate well. No reason to look like that. Probably just the lighting, he reasoned. Still, as he turned to leave, he noticed something that made him stop. His reflection lingered, only by half a second, but enough. He moved his hand to test it. Wave left, wave right. The image followed, but it was always just behind. Subtle, off, like someone trying very hard to mimic him and failing just slightly. Is this a latency issue? He leaned close, tapped the mirror. Cold glass. No give. No sound. Nothing behind but more corridor and his double, mimicking his curiosity with that fraction of a second delay. He checked the footage on the camera. The lens showed him, exactly as expected. No lag. No delay. The mirror, then. He frowned, staring down the length of the corridor. The further mirrors seemed dimmer, like the reflections were absorbed rather than bounced. He could barely make out the end. He took a few hesitant steps forward. The corridor narrowed the deeper he went, or at least felt like it did. The air thickened, tinged with iron and mildew, a scent like forgotten hospital beds and ancient rust. His own footsteps grew muffled by the old linoleum, and each step was answered by the quiet, frictionless whisper of his reflection's footfall, trailing just behind. Halfway down, he paused. The mirrors on either side now returned his image in triplicate, distorted by age and grime, 1,000 versions of himself fanning out in both directions. Some were sharp, others blurred, and one or two were wrong. He tried not to look too closely, but it was impossible not to notice. One smiled when he didn't, and in the one just ahead, perhaps 6 or 7 meters, there was a shape behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Back to the mirror. Gone. His heart thudded. This was what he came for, wasn't it? Proof. Evidence. Not just tricks of the eye, but real, documentable anomalies. But he couldn't shake the creeping unease. Not fear, not yet, but that quiet unraveling that starts in the stomach and coils upward. Something about this corridor, the way it bent light and time, made him feel like he'd already been walking for longer than he had. He backed away, turned off the camera. One night of recording would be enough. No need to stay. As he left, he avoided looking at the mirrors. He didn't notice that one of them didn't stop watching. Marcus hadn't planned to return so soon. The footage from the first night gnawed at him. He'd watched it again and again, frame by frame in some places, trying to dismiss what he saw as glitches, digital ghosts. But it wasn't the delay in his reflection that truly unsettled him. It was what came after. Roughly 4 hours into the recording, the mirrors began to change. Not all at once. At first, it was only a shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt. Then, in the far end of the corridor, came movement. Not Marcus, not the camera, something deeper within the glass. A silhouette, not visible with the naked eye that night, but on film, it was clear. It paced in the mirrored corridor, slow and aimless, as if trapped inside a box of endless reflections. No sound, no explanation. A presence. By the 6th hour, there were more. Watching them was like watching figures underwater. Distorted, murky, and real. Some faced the mirrors. Some turned sideways, as if listening to something. One leaned so close to the surface of the glass, it seemed ready to break through. And the strangest part, none of them looked like him. They weren't reflections at all. He should have been afraid. Deeply, instinctively afraid. But what Marcus felt instead was a pull. A slow, blooming obsession. Whatever lived in that corridor, it wasn't just shadows or fragments of memory. It acted. It moved with intent. It observed. He returned 3 days later, alone again. A late afternoon sky hung above the sanatorium, bruised with early dusk. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, but he didn't care. His steps were purposeful now, practiced. The building welcomed him with the same breathless silence. He brought more equipment, multiple cameras this time, audio recorders, even a motion sensor, though he wasn't sure how useful they'd be. What he was dealing with didn't follow normal rules. He knew that now. Down the corridor, he noticed it immediately. The mirrors had changed. The grime no longer dulled them. In fact, they seemed cleaner, clearer, like something, or someone, had been wiping them down, preparing them. A chill passed through his spine. He set up the main camera at the midpoint of the hall and one smaller unit at the far end, facing back toward the entrance. The motion sensor clicked into place and lit up green. Good. He crouched near the tripod, adjusting the angle. His own face loomed in the mirror beside him. He looked different again, paler, perhaps. Eyes too wide. But there was something else. A smudge on the mirror behind him. He reached out to wipe it, and froze. The smudge was a fingerprint, on the inside of the glass. He leaned closer. More prints became visible, not his. Too small. Too many. As if dozens of hands had pressed up from behind the mirror in quiet, desperate intervals. Marcus recoiled, breath catching in his throat. The air in the corridor had changed. Heavy. Charged. The lights in the sanatorium flickered, faint, distant, though the building hadn't had power for decades. He swore he heard a faint hum, like electricity bleeding through wires long dead. He turned toward the entrance. It seemed farther away than before. The mirrors reflected and re-reflected, warping the perspective, and suddenly he couldn't tell if he was closer to the exit or deeper in. The sensation disoriented him, like walking through a funhouse that hated him. Then the motion sensor chirped. Once, then again. Movement detected, down the hall, in the direction he'd just set the second camera. He stood, slowly, heart pounding. He looked into the mirror nearest him, then down to the next, and the next. The corridor stretched out like a throat. Nothing. Then a flicker. He didn't move, but his reflection did. Not just a delay this time. No, his reflection twitched, suddenly and violently, like something had seized control of the limbs. The mirrored version of himself jerked its head to one side, then back. Fast, deliberate. Marcus staggered back. The reflection smiled. Not a grin, not mischief. A smile of recognition. The hallway behind him was empty, but the mirror was full. He turned to run, and stopped. The entrance was gone. Only more corridor, and more mirrors. He was no longer sure which direction he had come from, or if he'd ever left. Panic didn't arrive as a scream. It came slow, patient, a tightening of the lungs, a weight behind Marcus's eyes. He stood frozen between rows of mirrors that now seemed to breathe with him. Inhale when he did, exhale just a moment after. The corridor pulsed with low light and deeper shadow, as if the building had grown a pulse. He spun, trying to find his bearings, but the endless reflections betrayed him. Each movement fractured, repeated, reversed, A disorienting ballet performed by someone who looked like him, but wasn't him. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." He reached for his phone, dead. No signal, no battery. He hadn't remembered it dying. Maybe it never rang when it should have. The motion sensor chirped again, this time closer. He turned toward the far end. His camera there had started recording automatically. Through its tiny red indicator, he saw motion. Something moved into the corridor from a mirror. Not out of it, into it. Like stepping from one room into another. Casual, seamless. A figure. Slender, wearing what looked like a white hospital gown, barefoot. It didn't seem to notice the camera. It didn't seem to care. It looked familiar. He narrowed his eyes, stepped forward a few feet. His breath fogged the glass. He watched, heartbeat fluttering like a moth. The figure turned. Marcus stumbled back, breath catching. It was his mother, or a perfect copy of her. Same soft features, same gray streak in her dark hair. The gentle way she once tilted her head when she was about to scold him. But her eyes were wrong. Too wide, too still. She reached out a hand toward the mirror, toward him, not the camera. A movement that somehow broke the rules of depth. He backed away, only for a hand to brush his shoulder. He whipped around, no one. But in the mirror behind him, someone stood at his back. Close enough to touch. He lunged forward, out of the mirror's angle, then turned again. "Gone. Not real," he muttered. "This place is full of tricks, hallucinations, light refraction. I've been here too long." But even as he said it, he knew the words were brittle. The corridor wasn't playing tricks. It was watching, from every surface, every faint glimmer, eyes that weren't eyes, faces that blinked only when he looked away. The mirrors no longer merely reflected. They remembered. They showed things they should not know. He began to walk, counting steps. 20, 30, 40. Somewhere in the corridor, he passed himself. It happened between blinks. One moment, his reflection mirrored him perfectly. The next, it was walking in the opposite direction. Same gait, same camera bag, same clothes, but not him. He stopped. The reflection continued, unfazed, until it disappeared behind the curve of another mirror. No sound, no acknowledgement. Marcus stood trembling, fingers numb around the camera strap. What would happen? He wondered if he followed. What would happen if he caught up? He didn't get the chance to find out. From the depths of the mirror, something emerged. Not from the mirror, but within it, deeper than reflection, beyond the glass. A crowd. Shapes, pale and wrong. People in tattered clothes, hospital gowns, old uniforms. Some had blank, blurred faces like overexposed film. Others had no faces at all. They moved without sound, drifting past their mirrored selves with no footsteps, no gravity. Their heads turned at once toward him, and every mirror reflected a different angle of the same horror. The crowd moving, converging, silent and inevitable. He screamed, but no sound came. Only his reflection screamed back, a silent, open-mouthed terror frozen in glass. Then the mirrors began to vibrate, not visibly, but inside a low, droning frequency that buzzed against his teeth and deep into his bones. A hum he couldn't hear, only feel. The air thickened, glass trembling not from force, but from anticipation, from welcome. He turned and ran, not toward the entrance. He no longer knew where that was, but anywhere away from the crowd, away from himself, away from the trap of memory and mimicry. Behind him, he thought he heard the sound of shattering. Just one pain, then another, like glass lungs exhaling, like something being let out. The sound followed him. Not footsteps, not really. It was more like resonance, a pressure that rippled through the corridor behind him, echoing without sound, as if the glass itself had learned to breathe, and now each pain exhaled his name in vibrations he could feel through the soles of his shoes. Marcus. He didn't know how long he'd been running. The corridor shifted behind him with every step, not longer but deeper, like the space had learned to fold in on itself, reflections multiplying into an impossible lattice of hallways. There was no up or down anymore, just corridor, just glass, just them. He skidded to a halt when the air changed, that same strange, invisible current that tugged at his skin like static before a storm. Before him stood a mirror that was no longer his. It showed a different corridor. Same architecture, same walls, but no camera, no Marcus, no motion sensor, only someone else. A girl in a hospital gown, maybe 13, pale, hollow-eyed, standing in the center of the mirrored hallway, staring through her reflection and into his, as if they'd locked eyes across some impossible gulf between worlds. She stepped forward. Marcus flinched, but she didn't leave the mirror. She merely approached its surface and raised a hand. It didn't press against the glass. It didn't smudge. It hovered inches away. He stepped closer, hypnotized. "Who are you?" he whispered. Her lips moved. One word. He couldn't hear it, but he recognized it. "Help." His chest tightened. That was when the corridor behind her changed. Darkness surged like black ink flooding a tank. A shape, massive, angular, impossibly tall, unfolded from the shadows. It didn't walk. It simply was, stretching across mirrors, like its form was too large to be contained. The girl didn't move. The figure reached for her. Marcus slammed his fist against the mirror. "Move," he shouted. But she only looked at him calm, resigned. And as the shape consumed her, the image in the mirror shimmered and faded. The corridor became his again. Empty. He staggered back, gasping. Then something caught his eye. A mirror to the right, cracked now, its reflection warped. And in it he saw himself. Not standing. Sitting. Older. Maybe by years. Same clothes, but worn, faded. His face was thinner, unshaven. Eyes sunken with the weight of months. He was sitting in the middle of the corridor, camera in his lap, motionless. And smiling. Not mad. Not broken. But at peace. As if he belonged there. Marcus turned away, refused to believe it, and began to run again. His legs ached, the walls blurred. Mirrors flashed by like cards shuffled in a game he didn't understand. Then, suddenly, silence. Stillness. He was back at the entrance. The real entrance. The rotting door hung open behind him, daylight spilling across the warped floorboards like liquid gold. The forest beyond swayed gently. Birds sang. The world untouched. He hesitated. Behind him, the corridor stood impossibly quiet. The mirrors still. His reflection returned, as it should, a perfect mimic. No delay. No crowd. No false mother. No impossible futures. Only him. He backed out slowly, never turning his back on the hall. Only when he stepped into sunlight did he let out a sound, a dry, broken laugh. But even then, he knew it wasn't over, because as he packed the camera and turned to leave, he glanced one last time through the viewfinder and saw himself still standing in the corridor, watching, not waving, not warning, just watching, and smiling. End.